Stock compounders, Brad here. So I decided to go down a little rabbit hole recently. So just a week and a half ago, MOI Global Manual of Ideas put on the 2022 Best Ideas Conference. Now this is where dozens of some of the best investors around the world come together and pitch their best idea. So in this case, it was their best idea in early 2022. And I think everyone can go to this website and just kind of get a quick overview of what idea was pitched. You have to be a member to actually watch the presentation. It's usually like an hour-long presentation, really kind of digging into the details of the investment opportunity. But what I decided to do, the rabbit hole I went down, was what best ideas were pitched last year in 2021 and how had those ideas done. Okay, so it's pretty easy to do that. Just under the kind of front page for the best ideas, you can see access past best ideas conferences. Okay, so I just clicked on 2021. I made a list of all the ideas that were being pitched, and I looked them all up real quick in Ticker Terminal. And the result, I just listed the top 7 performers, okay? Very impressive. Over the course of a year, you've got anywhere from like a 3x, nearly a 3x, with TTI down to plus 75% for the year. And of course, I also listed who that stock was picked by. And in some cases, they're on Twitter. In some cases, they're not. Obviously, I posted this on Twitter. So if they were on Twitter, I included that here as a Twitter username. And these are all compared to the benchmark for these people is the S&P 500. The S&P did 25% from the beginning of 21 to the beginning of 2022. So, fairly impressive. And I thought, well, these might be investors that are worth following. If they put out letters to their investors, if they have a fund that has to file a 13F, it manages over 100 million, may be worth looking at what some of these investors are doing each quarter. You could also potentially do that in Ticker Terminal, where there's a track investing gurus. You can type the name of the fund in here and follow it that way. And often, Ticker will include investments outside of the US that won't show up on a 13F filing as well, which is super helpful. But so I posted this. I was pretty proud of myself for doing this bit of research here. Best ideas over the last year. And I got this response from Ezra, Ezra Krangle. He had compiled a list of the best ideas, top performers since the first edition of the Best Ideas Conference, which was back in 2014. Okay, so I think this was the 8th year or so, maybe the 9th year. So I thought, wow, that's cool. Let me dig a little deeper into this. Because I thought to myself, if I could figure out what best ideas have compounded the most impressively since they were first pitched, that could be some really interesting data. Even more interesting than just seeing which picks had outperformed over the course of a year, which had been the biggest baggers since they were first pitched. So that's what I set out to do. Just a note here, Tencent shows up as the highest. What is this, like a 36x since it was picked 4 years ago? That is wrong. Tencent has basically done nothing over the last 4 years. So that one I had to remove, and I verified all of these. And they were pretty much all right except Tencent. So here's the list I came up with. We've got the company, the manager who pitched the company, when it was pitched. So these are all in January. The Best Ideas Conference for MOI always takes place in January. What was the price when it was pitched? Now, these aren't all in US dollars, but I stayed consistent. If it was in Canadian dollars, the current price is also in Canadian dollars. So this bagger, holds. So you got the price pitched, you got the current price. What is that multiple? That's this bagger column. And then what's the compound annual growth rate, right? Some of these, you've got this C Limited was pitched 3 years ago, okay? And it's been almost a 15 bagger in 3 years. So obviously you're going to have an incredible compound annual growth rate for that kind of growth. So the CAGR just kind of normalize. What is the annual growth rate here? In addition to kind of the total return with this bagger column. And if I found the manager on Twitter, I included their username here. But then, another thought occurred to me. So it's possible, let's say for Ubiquity Networks, right, that this idea was pitched in January 2015, but it was pitched as this deep value play, right? And the manager had every intention, once this company came up to intrinsic value, to get rid of it, right? It was kind of a short-term Graham style investment, as opposed to this manager actually identifying it as a great compounder. So I wanted to get a sense, how is the manager looking at this particular investment that they're pitching? So what I did is I went through and I looked at the pitches themselves. So I went back to the Best Ideas Conference 2019, found the pitch for C Limited, Expel, and Joint Corp, and I copied just a quick little blurb, trying to extract the essence of how that manager is seeing this particular opportunity. And I put it in this sheet here. So just kind of a quick thesis for C Limited: aggressively expanding and vying to become the dominant e-commerce platform, similar to Alibaba or Amazon in Southeast Asia. Okay. E-commerce is not the only thing that C Limited does. They have a big gaming component as well. But this was the crucial piece in terms of the investment thesis for Sam Adranji. So I tried to pull out what is the high-level thesis for each of these companies to get a sense, are they seeing these as compounders, or are they seeing them as, I just want to make a quick double and get out? And the reason I wanted to try to gauge that is, if some of these great compounders were identified as such early on, that may be, a particularly thoughtful investor to really pay attention to. If I was being really comprehensive about this, I would look at what were all of the ideas that Sam Adranji pitched at MOI Global over the years, and how have those performed compared to what his investment thesis was for those companies. And ideally, I want to find who are the best at identifying these great compounders, right? And then I want to add those to my short list of investors to look at each quarter to see what they're buying, and if they're talking about it, are they seeing it as a compounder? So obviously nothing about this is an exact science. I'm really just trying to find patterns and indications that some of these investors might have some ability to identify great long-term investment opportunities. So obviously a lot more work to be done here. But you can take a look at kind of a high-level thesis for each of these investors with regard to the company that is absolutely crushing it. My other question was, are these investors still holding, right? Or did they get out at that 2x or 3x or whatever it was many X's ago? One guy who did respond was Joe Magyar with Afterpay. And it sounds like when Square, I think maybe announced the acquisition, or Afterpay announced that they were being acquired by Square, I think that's when Joe exited. So it might be interesting to look, what was his total return on that investment. Another challenge, a lot of these funds, so I haven't included the fund here, but in the first tab, you can see the fund that's associated with these managers. A lot of them can't be found through Ticker Terminal. It just doesn't track these particular funds. Maybe they're too small, or maybe they're primarily outside of the US in terms of what they're buying. So they don't have to file 13Fs, and it's just harder to see what they're doing. But, I think going through this exercise, to me, this is a more productive way to find, to reverse engineer great long-term compounders than to simply pull a list of what companies have generated the greatest returns over the last decade or whatever it is. To actually look at, hey, these investors actually pitched these ideas, right? And this is what they became, at least until now. Maybe they have a long way to run still. But it strikes me as a more interesting kind of rabbit hole to go down, where, there's actually something to chew on. There's an investment thesis, there's a write-up, there's a pitch to actually chew on for some of these great compounders, rather than looking back and just cherry picking which companies did best and try to extract lessons from that. So anyway, this was just a fun little rabbit hole that I went down. And I'm curious if any of you guys want to take the reins from here and continue going down the rabbit hole. Please let me know. Reach out to me on Twitter. My DMs are open. Let me know what you find. But I was particularly impressed by Expel. I think from 2011 to 2021, over that decade, Expel had been 1,000 bagger, okay, which is insane. So it had run up a ton by 2019, and yet Andy still bought it. And assuming he's still holding, I don't know if he's still holding, but assuming he is, he's made a killing, right? In 3 years, a 12 bagger. That is insane. You can see that in the compound annual growth rate. And this compound annual growth rate is actually in line with what Expel has done over the last 11 years or so. Okay, so it's continued over the last 3 years at an incredibly high compounded annual growth rate. I'm just pointing that out because I think a lot of investors might look at a company like Expel and see, hey, this has been 100 bagger or whatever over the last 8 or 9 years. Clearly it's overpriced. But Andy was able to go a little bit deeper than that and actually see that there was still quite a bit of room to run here. So that I noticed that as well. So anyway, guys, I wanted to give a shout out to Randall Abramson. Had 2 in this list, which is awesome. They were pitched at the same time back in January of 2016. But that is very impressive. A 7 bagger and a 5 bagger. So kudos to Randall for the double in this best performing MOI compounders to date. So I think I'll leave it there, guys. Thanks for watching. And again, let me know if you decide to go down any of these rabbit holes and what you find. I'd be very intrigued to learn about that. All right, guys. See you in the next one. Take care.